Chairman of the Remand Review Task Force, Justice Clemens Homanyinuga, has described the absence of investigators during the Justice for All program court hearing as unfortunate. A total of 92 cases were heard. 3 of the remand prisoners were cautioned. Some 38 had their bail application refused, and 3 referred for psychiatric treatment, while the court declined jurisdiction in 3 cases. Speaking to Joy News after the hearing, Justice Homanyinuga added that this affects the work of the court.
A total of 92 cases were heard on Wednesday. 3 of the remand prisoners were cautioned, 38 had their bail application refused, 3 referred for psychiatric treatment, while the court declined jurisdiction in 3 cases. Speaking to Joy News after the sessions at the prison, Chairman of the Remand Review Task Force, Justice Clemens Homanyinuga, said it was quite unfortunate that some officers from the Criminal Investigations Department failed to show up. This, he said, affects the court's work.
Well, it's unfortunate that some of the criminal investigators were not there, but sufficient notice was given to them because they are valuable. They give us information about the cases and others, and when they are absent, it quite disturbs the court. But we hope that in future they will all endeavor to be present so that things can move better than they did today.
Some of the prisoners who have been freed spoke to Joy News about the program and their expectation as they prepare to leave.
State.
And to court how many times?
3 times.
Court
jam said this also one discharged.
See out no. Okoye dena wo ye dada nansa wo ba na se den bim na obeye
o temi pie kra mikro okra mitena ho biom
adena wo kasa
mkope bi atena yejuma
adena wo kasa wo peso betena kromo biom
o se the way am wa na o se ma wo me ko a ka mitena me ka wanti aka nyini yejuma a sa mu atumi a obi amba ade otum be kotena obiom de ana chese no makomi yamde.
So he has been here for 7 years, like you heard him say, and he says he went to the farm with his cousin, and he was staying with a younger relative of his mom, and that's where he was living. They went to the farm, and unfortunately, while trying to stop a grass cutter using a cutlass, he ended up lynching the cousin, and he rushed the cousin home, but before they got home, because of the distance between the farm and home, by the time they got home, the cousin had passed on. So since then he was picked up by the police. He was brought here on remand. He has been to court 3 times, and that is when he was arrested. He was 18 years and he's now 25 years. So he has been here for 7 years, and the court is now saying that he can't go home now. And he says he's excited. He also adds that going back, he's not going to the neighborhood where he resided, because as the only child of his mother and this particular issue happening, he expected some support from his relatives. But unfortunately, he has been abandoned here in the prisons, and no one has been paying him visits. So as he's leaving, he intends to move away to a different neighborhood where he hopes to continue with the farm, and he has been undertaken before he was brought in here. Public Relations Officer of the Eastern Region Ghana Prison Service, DSP Courage Achim, explained the process that discharged prisoners would have to go through before they finally walk free.
Well, once they have been acquitted and discharged by the court today, what we would have to do will be to go through the documentation process and then hand them over to their respective detectives who are working on their case. We have to hand them over to the police because they have been acquitted and discharged of a particular case today, but they may be having other cases pending which may not be known to us, but the police have those details, and so it is always appropriate to hand them over to the police. So it is the police that will eventually release them.
From experience, how long does this take?
Oh, for those that have been acquitted and discharged, it's within a short period, 3 days up to from 3 days to a week. That could be done. But those that have been granted bail would have to stay in until they are able to meet the bail conditions.
The program is expected to be replicated in other prisons across the country. For Joy News, Joseph Akable.
Well, Senior State Attorney at the Attorney General's Department, Dominic Bakoma, also said the absence of the investigators made it difficult for prosecution to either oppose or agree to a motion.
Well, generally, the process has been quite okay, except for one or two lapses that we realized in the course of proceedings in court. As the learned justice of the Court of Appeal did indicate, we were expecting the investigators from the Criminal Investigations Division to assist us in the course of the trial, because we didn't have all the necessary facilities that will enable us to be able to take decision involving the applications that have been brought before the courts. So sometimes we need the input of the investigators to be able to take a decision, because we are not privy to all the information that we need to be able to either oppose or agree to the applications that have been brought before the court. By and large, I realized that everything was okay, but that hitch really brought some impediments in the smooth running of the program today. That's what I can say for now. Yeah.
And we stay with the subject a while longer. I'll speak to my colleague Joseph Akable, who witnessed this whole ceremony at the Nsawam prison. He joins us live here on the show. So good morning, Joseph. It seemed to me as though the judges, the state attorney, are a bit frustrated by the whole process. What seemed to be the problem?
Well, the main challenge has to do with the fact that the investigators from the Criminal Investigations Department, they are the ones who are handling the individual cases of the people, and these are cases that cut across the country. So what the absence meant was that for the state attorneys who are supposed to do prosecution, they have just the docket, and more often than not, the docket doesn't have ample information as to why a prisoner is on remand, and as to why the state wants to keep the prisoner, and whether that prisoner should be left off the hook. So for most cases, it made it very difficult for them to prosecute those particular cases. There were instances that the state attorneys had to exit the court and call the investigators on phone, and there were some instances where they couldn't reach them. So it made it very difficult, and that contributed to the instances where some had their bail applications turned down.
But with all the frustrations throughout the process, we had some prisoners who were let go, some were cautioned, some were discharged, but there were others whose applications were also turned down. Describe the general mood as you witnessed it yesterday.
Now, for the prisoners, before they go in for proceedings, they are in a prayerful mood. Some are anxious. They are all interacting with their maker. They want to be left off the hook. But once they go in, and it's good news for them, for some it was jubilation. There was one gentleman, when he went in and finally the judge said, "You've been acquitted and discharged," right in the court he went down on his knees, thanked the judge, went out and started screaming, "I've been left off the hook." For that was the excitement for him. For those who unfortunately had the application turned down, they came back in a very sorrowful mood. They were venting their spleen, making utterances to give the impression that they felt they've not been dealt with fairly. Whilst for some of the prisoners who came in, they had their case not caught at all. So they were quite sad about that, and they were a bit frustrated. And also one thing that was quite interesting, that is those who have been discharged, they were trying to find out when they will be allowed to exit the prison, because we understand once you've been acquitted and discharged, there are still some processes, some issues of documentation that you have to go through before you're allowed to exit. There was one gentleman who was pleading that they should allow him leave the prisons with the judicial service buses that are coming, since they were heading to Accra. He stays in Accra and he wants to move with them. So that was the situation in the prison.
You know, usually when you watch the movies, or I think the scenes that are generally described, you have people waiting for you when you're acquitted or when you're discharged. Did you see any family members?
There was a bit of difference with this particular one. You don't have them coming around, and their understanding is the fact that these are people, for some they have been in cells for 7 years, and a good number of them they say that as the years went by, their parents, their relatives had abandoned them. They were not coming in, so you didn't have that coming in. They were just there alone. They were hoping that once their case has been determined, whether they've been granted bail or not, they are waiting for the other processes to follow, so finally they exited the prison.
So what's the plan for the task force after Nsawam prisons?
They intend to visit other prisons across the country.
Okay, all right, Joseph, we'll leave it here, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully you don't go back in there, not as a reporter. Nobody wishes that for you. Let's move on with other stories. stories, and opposition members of parliament are calling on government to explain how it intends to fund the electricity subsidies announced on Tuesday. Isaac Kwame Isiama, who is also a member of the Mines and Energy Committee in Parliament, contends no such provision was made in the 2016 budget. He tells our parliamentary correspondent Elton Brobe the decision is politically motivated and it's aimed at winning votes ahead of the elections.
The Electricity Company of Ghana announced a review in the tariff it says reflects government subsidies aimed at cushioning consumers. The relief targeted at all residential users is expected to cost government over 300 million cedis. Isaac Kwame Isiama is however questioning the source of funding for the subsidy.
If government wants to spend, it's only parliament that has got the power to grant the executive the power to spend.
There was nothing like that in the appropriation.
There was none of that in the appropriation act. The budget that we approved 2016 budget, that committed in the appropriation act of 2016, there's nothing like subsidy of 300 million Ghana cedis. What is in is subsidy of 50 million for petroleum and not for electricity. So it is not true. It is not true. The president can only spend when parliament has given him the approval through the appropriation act. I serve on the Mines and Energy Committee. The budget that we approved as an estimate from that Ministry of Power, whatever it is, there's no allocation of that amount. And what we passed here as a body, parliament, the entire body passed the appropriation act, there's no allocation of 300 million Ghana cedis for subsidy for electricity. There's nothing like that. So it's not true. It is not going to work. It's another package of propaganda that the president has just thrown it out there. It's not going to work. The president is panicking, knowing very well that the election is around the corner. Come November 7th or December 7th, he's going to lose the election. So therefore, let me throw that to the eyes of Ghanaians.
The acting general secretary of the New Patriotic Party, John Boydu, also says government is only shortchanging Ghanaians.
If government decides that they are giving a general reduction or subsidy right from July, what happened between January and ending of June? We've been shortchanged. Is it that the software issue was not true? Because we heard the ECG speaking boldly on it, that the presidency or the president was being untruthful, saying that the problem of the hikes in electricity was due to software. And this clearly shows that it is not true. In any case, why are we where we are? From 2013 to date, we've had close to around 900% increase in our electricity bills. So if you come reducing it by 5%, even for lifeline users, it makes it worse. Everybody is shortchanged.
You're watching News Desk. We'll be back with more.